You clear the garden, you pick the ripe vegetables, you tidy the beds, you sweep the patio. You think everything looks fine. And then, one morning, you see the signs again. Something dug near the edge of the bed. A tomato bitten and left behind. Seedlings disturbed. Feed scattered. Compost scratched open. A bag in the shed gnawed at the corner. And suddenly the whole space feels different. Not ruined, perhaps, but unsettled. Because once rats start using a garden, they rarely come in as a one-time mistake. They come because something about the property keeps saying yes. That is the part most people miss. A rat does not return because it likes your garden in some abstract way. It returns because the garden is offering one or more of four things: food, water, shelter, safe movement. If even one of those stays easy, the problem often stays alive. That is why Hubert does not begin with panic. He does not begin with the loudest solution on the shelf. And he does not begin with poison scattered around the place where food is grown. He begins with a harder but smarter question. What is this property still giving them? Because once you answer that honestly, rat control stops being random, and it starts becoming practical. Today, Hubert is going to show you how he keeps rats away from the garden without poison or traps. Not with fantasy, not with one miracle trick, but with a layered system that makes the garden harder to use, less comfortable to enter, and less rewarding to revisit. That is the real secret. Not killing the problem after it settles in, but changing the garden so it stops welcoming the problem in the first place. Hubert wants to say something very clearly before we go further. Rats are not really a gardening problem. They are a property system problem. That means if you only focus on the one tomato they bit, or the one hole they dug, you may miss the bigger pattern entirely. Rats stay where life is easy. Easy food, easy water, easy shelter, easy paths, easy hiding places, easy access to human neglect. That is why so many people feel trapped in a cycle. They fix one symptom, then another appears. They chase one corner, then the rats shift to the next, and eventually, they start believing the animals are unbeatable. Hubert does not believe that. He believes most rat problems are not solved by intensity first. They are solved by removing comfort. A rat may be clever, but it is also practical. If your property becomes too open, too exposed, too dry, too clean, too interrupted, too strongly scented, and too hard to feed from, the rat does not usually stay around to argue with you. It finds an easier place. That is the mindset behind everything in this video. Now, Hubert is not pretending poison and traps do not exist. They do, and in some severe situations, stronger control may be part of the response. But around a food garden, a backyard homestead, compost, chickens, pets, and areas where people live closely with the land, Hubert does not like to make poison or traps the first answer. Why? Because first answers matter. If the first answer is only reaction, then the root cause often stays alive. The food source stays, the clutter stays, the shelter stays, the easy path stays. And all you have done is treat a symptom while leaving the invitation untouched. There are also practical concerns. Poison around the wrong areas creates risk. A dead rat in a hidden wall creates another problem. Poorly placed traps become trouble for the wrong animals, and fear-driven control often makes people careless. Hubert prefers a calmer first step. Make the place less attractive. Make movement less comfortable. Make food harder to reach. Make shelter harder to use. And use plants, layout, cleanup, and structure to pressure the problem before it grows. That is not softness. That is strategy. The first rule is the simplest one. Remove what rats are coming for. This sounds obvious, but it is amazing how often people skip it. They want to solve the rat problem without changing the food problem. But rats do not come for philosophical reasons. They come because something edible is being offered too easily. Fallen fruit under trees, chicken feed scattered on the ground, open compost with fresh scraps exposed, seed packets or bags stored badly in sheds, pet food left out too long, overripe vegetables forgotten in the bed. Every one of those things is a message, and the message says, there is value here. Come back. Hubert walks his garden with that question in mind. If I were a rat, what would bring me back tonight? That question changes how you see the property. Suddenly, a mist squash does not look harmless anymore. A half-open feed bin does not look minor anymore. A pile of fallen figs or berries does not look charming anymore, because charm to us can be invitation to them. The first layer of rat control is not fear. It is honesty. The second rule is to stop feeding rats by accident. This is a little different from visible food in the garden. This is about the routines that quietly keep a rat problem alive, without anyone meaning to. A feeder filled too high so grain spills out. A compost bucket dumped carelessly. Bird seed scattered under a feeder and never cleaned up. A garage corner where bags of feed sit open just enough. A sack of potatoes or onions stored low and loosely. None of these things are dramatic by themselves. That is exactly why they are dangerous. Small, repeated accidents create steady comfort, and steady comfort is what makes rats settle. Hubert believes one of the best questions a property owner can ask is not, "What dramatic thing should I do tonight?" but "What quiet thing am I still doing every week that makes this easier for them?" That question saves a lot of wasted effort. Food brings rats in. Shelter keeps them there. And shelter is often where the real long-term battle is lost. Hubert looks for the quiet shelter zones. Boards stacked too low against a wall. Tall weeds against a fence. Dense junk behind sheds. Untouched corners under decking. Piles of pots, bricks, timber, or tarps that stay dry, dark, and undisturbed. Rats do not need luxury. They need cover. That is why a property can feel mostly tidy to a person and still feel perfect to a rat. A single forgotten corner can matter more than a whole cleaned patio. Hubert's rule is simple. If something creates dry darkness and low disturbance, inspect it. If it serves no purpose, clear it. If it must stay, lift it. If it cannot be lifted, make it easier to see under and around. If vegetation is too dense near the house or food area, thin it back. Open sightlines matter, not because rats are afraid of beauty, but because rats hate exposure. The fourth rule is to protect the edges. Rats often do not appear in the center first. They test boundaries, fence lines, foundation edges, pipe entries, corners of sheds, the backside of raised beds, the little spaces where structure meets soil. Hubert always pays attention to edges because edges are where confidence begins. If the edges feel easy, the rats keep exploring. If the edges feel interrupted, exposed, scented, or physically awkward, the property becomes less attractive. This is where practical barrier planting, clean borders, and physical maintenance come together. A clean foundation edge with no tall weeds. A fence line without junk pressed against it. Raised beds with less hidden space beneath or behind. Open visibility around corners. These things matter more than people think, Because most rat problems do not begin with a dramatic invasion. They begin with easy edges. The fifth rule is to use smell and planting pressure. Hubert talked about this in the earlier rat-deterrent plant video, and it matters here too. Strong aromatic plants do not solve everything alone. But placed well, they help create discomfort. Peppermint near foundations and fence lines. Lavender in sunny borders. Rosemary near entry paths. Garlic around useful beds. Marigolds in dense rows around vegetable areas. Wormwood on harder outer edges. Elderberry on wider boundaries. These plants do not form a perfect wall, but they create a message. This place is not as easy, calm, or comfortable as another place. That matters because rats prefer easy. Hubert especially likes strong plantings near places where the property transitions from wild edge to managed space. That is where scent pressure often has the most practical value. The sixth rule is compost discipline. A lot of people love compost in theory and accidentally build a rat buffet in practice. Hubert is not against compost at all. He believes in it deeply. But compost must be managed like a system, not treated like a magical pile where anything can be thrown and forgotten. Fresh exposed kitchen scraps, loose food waste on top, soft fruit, cooked leftovers, greasy scraps. A pile too open and too easy to climb into. That combination can create exactly the kind of moist, warm, food-rich zone rats love. Hubert prefers tighter, cleaner compost habits. Cover fresh additions. Use enough carbon material. Avoid reckless dumping. Keep the surrounding area tidy. And if a compost system is repeatedly attracting rats, change the structure, not just the hope, because hope is not compost management. The seventh rule is structure. Rats love convenience. So Hubert tries to remove it. That means thinking about how beds are built, how produce is stored, how feed is kept, and how materials sit on the property. If a raised bed has a hidden gap that stays dry and dark, inspect it. If stored produce sits low, loose, and easy to gnaw, lift it or contain it better. If feed bins are weak, replace them. If sacks stay open in sheds, close them properly. If something is stored in a way that makes rat access easy, then no amount of wishing will change what that structure is telling them. And what it is telling them is, you can use this place. Hubert wants the opposite message. The eighth rule is awareness. Rats are often most active when the garden is quiet. That means a lot of people only notice the results, not the timing. Hubert likes to pay attention to patterns. Where are the droppings? Where do disturbances repeat? Which root looks used more than once? What changes overnight near feed, compost, or stored harvest? That kind of observation matters. Because when you understand the pattern, you stop treating random damage as random. It becomes a root, a habit, a pressure point. And once you know the pressure point, your next action becomes much smarter. That is why Hubert prefers awareness over panic. Panic reacts to surprise. Awareness prepares for repetition. The ninth rule may be the most important one of all. Do not just interrupt one visit. Break the path. A rat that loses one tomato but still has the same root, the same shelter, the same compost access, and the same spilled feed will return. A rat that loses the route itself is dealing with a different property. That is the goal. Hubert wants the path to become uncertain, more exposed, less rewarding, less sheltered, less edible, less calm. That is when the pressure starts to work. One broken visit does not change much. A broken pattern changes everything. So what does Hubert's system actually look like? It is not one trick. It is layers. First, remove edible invitation. Second, stop accidental feeding habits. Third, clear shelter zones. Fourth, clean and expose the edges. Fifth, use scent and practical planting pressure. Sixth, manage compost properly. Seventh, store food and materials better. Eighth, watch patterns. Ninth, break the route. That may sound like a lot when spoken quickly, but in real life, it is simply the difference between a neglected property and a well-run one. And that is what Lush Green Garden is really about. Not perfect gardens, useful gardens, gardens that feed people, support animals, look good, and do not quietly invite every problem to settle in. Before we finish, Hubert wants to save you from the mistakes that quietly undo all the good work. Cleaning the garden bed but ignoring the shed. Securing feed but leaving fallen fruit. Planting mint but keeping cluttered corners. Tidying once but not changing habits. Fixing damage after it happens but never walking the property with fresh eyes. Wanting a quick win more than a lasting change. Those mistakes are very human, but they are also very expensive in time, because every one of them says the same thing to the rats. Come back. Something is still easy here. Hubert wants the opposite message. So, friends, if you want to keep rats away from the garden without poison or traps, remember this. Do not build your whole plan around killing the visitor. Build it around removing the welcome. Make food harder to reach. Make shelter harder to trust. Make movement less comfortable. Make the garden less forgiving to the problem. That is how Hubert thinks about it. Not as a dramatic war, but as steady pressure. And steady pressure works. Because rats are practical animals. When the property stops making life easy for them, they usually begin looking for easier ground. That is the real goal. A garden that feeds your family, supports your homestead, and feels cleaner, calmer, and harder for trouble to settle into. If this video helped you, subscribe to Lush Green Garden and join Hubert for more practical ways to grow useful plants. Protect your backyard and build a homestead that works better in real life. Until next time, take care of your borders, take care of your habits, and keep growing a garden that protects what it gives.